Hi, everyone. Welcome again to one of our Hobby Memorial Library live events. We are excited. We're continuing our environmental science series, and we have with us today CTC's environmental science professor, Professor Cristina Summers, and she is going to be talking to us about various subjects in environmental science. And we are thrilled to have you. So thank you so much for coming, and I'm going to go ahead and take it away. Let you take it away.
All right. Well, thank you. Thanks for having me. Good afternoon, everyone. Let me start sharing my screen here with you. Oops, sorry. Went to the last one.
It's
Okay,
okay.
the first one. There we go. Okay, so I think we all can recognize this here, right? So yeah, this is our home, as we know, our only home. This is it, right? Um, there is no, what do they call it? Planet B. So, so when we talk about the environment, of course, I teach environmental science here at CTC. Um, and a few of these things we actually cover like the first chapter. And so I'll show you some figures from our textbook and kind of get to those topics here in a minute. But mostly I'm going to talk about how to, I think one of the um, titles of this presentation was how to save the planet or saving the planet. So I'll just kind of share some ideas there. Some of them maybe a little more interesting and maybe that you haven't heard of lately. But there's a lot that can be done. But so anyway, the environment basically is everything on the planet, living and non-living, and of course that includes us and the things that we make. Of course, as you see there, the water, the air. So we actually depend on the environment and we affect the environment. And of course, that's a lot of what we look at in my class, environmental science. But just a couple of terms here. So environmental science, of course, that's the course I teach, and it has a lab with it. But it focuses on the natural sciences. So these would be like chemistry, physics, biology, geology, and we get a lot of that background scientific knowledge there in the first part of the semester so that we're able to focus on environmental issues for the rest of the semester. You know, what causes them, um, how to manage them, how to reduce our impact. So yeah, that's the class that I teach. Some other colleges might offer environmental studies. Um, it's mostly on how we interact with the environment. So looking at things like history, policy, economics, ethics, even. So it's more of the focus on the social sciences. Again, environmental science is more the natural sciences. And then there's environmentalism. Of course, this is a social movement that advocates for the protection of the environment through policy and individual behavior. So I consider myself an environmentalist, as many of y'all probably would as well. You know, you could do a lot, or you could do a little, or somewhere in between. So, but basically, yeah, anybody who cares about the environment, I think would be an environmentalist, especially if it's they're doing something about it to to not be part of the problem, I guess, be more part of the solution. So, so I just kind of want to look at those terms real quick. By the way, I do have a T-shirt. I'm not wearing it today, but it says "Do something green today." I thought that was a cool T-shirt. But um, you know, um, Earth Day is coming up next month, April 22nd, and I think we should just celebrate Earth Day every day, right? Like I said, do something green every day, um, not just think about it, once a year. So. So, just a brief little background here on environmentalism, at least in the US. There's kind of like two main phases. The first started in the mid to late 1800s. Um, after we had a history of kind of, exploiting natural resources and particularly timber and wildlife. There was rampant logging going on and decimation of bison and so on. So there's a few figures prominent here. Henry David Thoreau, one, a naturalist, a philosopher. And then this guy here, John Muir, of course, next to him is Teddy Roosevelt. You might recognize him. Was, influential president. Um, so let's see. So in this time period, we had the first national park, of course, as you know, probably, right, is Yellowstone, created in 1872 by an act of Congress. Then there was the Forest Reserve Act in 1891, and then later that helped to establish the U.S. forest system. And then the Sierra Club was founded in 1892, and John Muir was a co-founder there. So, so that was kind of the first period. And then the second period gained, which I guess more popular among the masses, right? Kind of like a cultural revolution, kind of starting in about the 70s, kind of along the same time as other social movements, activism movements like civil rights. You had civil rights protests, women's lib, war, protests. It's a very active time, right? Politically active time for many people, young people especially. So this here, environmentalism focused mostly on pollution, which was a major issue at that time period after many years of industrialization. So, of course, this is a picture of Rachel Carson, um, a nature writer. Her most famous book, of course, very influential in this time period was Silent Spring, you may have heard of. Mostly talking about the effects of DDT on wildlife. And in turn, of course, it could affect us as well because, we're animals as well. So, but there were other things going on too. You had this Santa Barbara oil spill in 1969. The Cuyahoga River caught fire several times about that time period. So people were kind of galvanized. They saw how bad, I guess, it got, the pollution and all, and felt like they had to do something about it, or at least bring attention to it to officials. And consequently, in the 70s, a lot of environmental legislation was passed. Clean Air Act, Clean Water Act, Endangered Species Act, and so on. So we actually did have an impact. People have an impact. So, so this is one figure actually from our textbook that we look at in class at the beginning of the semester, and it shows human population growth. So it took us a long time, but we have finally reached, well, it says here 7.5 billion. This might be a couple years dated, but it's closer to 8 billion now, very close to 8 billion. And of course, that number keeps growing. We're expected to reach, I think, 10 billion or near 10 billion by 2050. So, of course, that's exponential growth. You might recognize that pattern there, that curve. Okay. But yeah, it's very, very rapid growth. And so, kind of, back here we're talking about the 70s, more recent wave of environmentalism, at least here in the US, but also worldwide. Part of the concern came from this, looking at this rapid population growth. Are we going to be able to produce enough food to feed everyone? What about all this trash and pollution that's being created? Because of course, the more people you have, the more resources they use, right? And the more waste gets created. So there's more strain on ecosystems and the natural environment. So, of course, there's been discussions among environmental scientists about, their limits to growth, what's our carrying capacity, things like that. So those estimates kind of vary depending on who you talk to. Whereas technology has really helped us, right, to keep expanding, right, seemingly beyond our limits. But I guess the next concept I want to kind of bring up, and maybe you've heard about this too, it's the ecological footprint. So each of us has an ecological footprint. So what this is it's kind of a measure of how much land and water it takes to support your lifestyle. All the resources that you need, the food that you eat, where you live, the energy that you use, of course, in addition to that, the amount of land that's needed to absorb the waste or the air in the case of carbon emissions, right? So taking all that into account will give you your ecological footprint. And you can actually take a quiz if you go to this website here. Click on that. It's interactive. You go through a series of questions, asks you about where you live and your household and your consumption patterns, even about your diet. And there's actually two versions of the quiz. There's like a short version and a long version. I always recommend my students take the long version. It's takes a little longer, more detailed questions, but it gives you a more accurate ecological footprint. So, yeah, like you see there. So yeah, depending on how you answer those questions, yes, it'll give you at the end your ecological footprint. And the way it'll give it to you is right here. Well, just like yeah, right here, number of planets. So the number of planets it would take if everyone in the world lived like you. So that's what you'll see. And there's the next slide. So if you're a typical American, that would be 5. Let's see here. Y'all see? Can y'all see that? Okay. Yeah. So okay. Sure. Is that better? Just adjusted my microphone a little bit. Okay. So yeah, if you're a typical American, it would take 5 planets. So that's quite a bit, actually. If you look at a list of these countries, yeah, that's so yeah, the Americans have one of the largest ecological footprints. So you see some other countries. The world average, by the way, is 1.7. And I guess anything greater than 1 would not be good, right? So, because we only have 1 planet. So let me go back to this slide here. Okay. So 1.7, of course, that's more than 1. That's known as an overshoot. And since it looks like 1970 thereabouts, we have overshot the Earth's capacity to support us. Okay. So let's see here. Some statistics. Okay. Yeah, we look at a lot of statistics in class, in our class. Charts and graphs and numbers and okay. Let's see here. So that there's one way to give the footprint, like I said, the number of planets. The other is through hectares. Okay, I think a hectare is like 2.5 acres or something like that. Um, but right now, the average ecological footprint is like 2.7 world average. Okay, so typical person on the planet 2.7, which is greater than 2.1. Um, and 2.1 is what everyone would be allotted because that's how much productive land and water we have on the planet to support everyone on the planet. Okay. So anyway, they do some math. Where they get this from. So Earth has 11.4 billion hectares of productive land and water. So basically, if we divide that by however many people on the planet, in this case 8 billion, then that means each person is allotted about 2 hectares. But again, the average ecological footprint right now is 2.7. So that's the 2.7, that's an overshoot. Okay, so anything greater than 2.1 would be an overshoot. Okay. Anyway, that overshoot's been growing, like you see there, over the past few decades, and it's going to continue to do so for a couple of reasons. One is our population keeps growing, and another is that our consumption grows as well. So let's see here. So yeah, in the past 50 years, I'm trying looking for my little statistics here. In the past 50 years, while the world's population has more than doubled, the amount of material flowing through the economy has more than tripled. Okay, so that yeah, there's more people on the planet, but that also means, more people are using more resources, right? Consuming more things. Okay. So it's those two things. So population isn't the only problem, it's also consumption. So that's good to keep in mind when we're looking at this information. Another interesting thing here is there's what's known as the Earth Overshoot Day. So it marks the date when humanity's demand for natural resources in a given year exceeds what Earth can regenerate in that year. So back in 1970, um, it fell on December 23rd. Of course, December 31st would be great, right? Okay, December 23rd is not too bad. In 2000, it fell on October 4th. In 2015, it fell on August 13th. So the trend here, just like you see with that overshoot growing, is that Earth overshoot day gets earlier and earlier in the year. Now, interestingly, in 2020, it went back to August 22nd. Of course, that's because a lot of people, stayed home, and so there was less, carbon emissions, and well, that was most of it, right? Less energy use. So, okay, so that's just another kind of a way to look at it, right? That Earth Overshoot Day. So I think if you go to that link right there, the Global Footprint Network, it'll give you some information on that. There'll be some links in there to that. So, all right. So far, any questions or any clarification that's needed? I know I've been just kind of moving on. So just
No questions yet.
okay.
Yeah.
All right. Let's see here. So we looked at that. Yeah. Okay. All right, so solving environmental problems. Okay, so here's another figure we look at in our textbook, or from our textbook. A kind of multi-prong approach, right? So, of course, the government, right, sets policy, rules, laws, regulations. Talked about some environmental laws, a minute ago. The private sector, right, business, is important too, right? And technology. Of course, science is guiding all of this too, right? Informing government officials. There's scientists that work in the private sector, for example, in solar panels, right? So they've become much more efficient in recent years. The costs have come down, which is due to advances in, like you see, your efficiency technology. So that helps. And of course, government provides incentives, right, for people to buy solar panels because they are very expensive, like a tax credit. So that's an example there. Of course, citizens, actually buying the solar panels, right, and using them. So that would be a personal action or consumer choice. This is just one example, but there's many examples here, right? Like what you eat, how you vote, like it says here. Okay, where you donate your money. Okay, but I'm going to focus, I guess, the rest of the presentation here on personal actions, maybe consumer choices. So, like what as individuals we can do, right? So, collectively, we're all doing these things, then it could have a pretty big impact, right? So, yeah, and individual actions do matter. All right. So, you may have heard of these, right? The 3 R's: reduce, reuse, recycle. 3 R's of sustainability. Okay. So, of course, there's a nice little link there. Tips. This is from the EPA website. What you can do to reduce waste, like at home, at work, at school, in your yard. Okay, so and by the way, at the end of the presentation, I should have a list of all of these links that were throughout. So, okay. But there's actually more. So this kind of grows, and I've added some more too in my presentation. So I guess we'll take a look at reduce first, which basically means like consuming less, right? Okay. So in order, conserve resources, water, energy, chemicals, right? Okay. So yeah, many options here. Choose more durable products to begin with, right? Those with less packaging. Um, and so, well, reusable water bottles. Okay, so like I have here, very common nowadays. Of course, people still go out and buy water in plastic containers or water bottles, right? But if you remember, many years ago, that plastic used to be thick and hard, right? Hard to crush. Now it's very thin. So that's one way that I guess, manufacturers have reduced the amount of material, right? And therefore waste. So, so yeah, I mean, consumers, versus manufacturers are all involved in this, in all of this. So, um, what else? Double-sided printing. Okay, I always do that. E-billing or e-statements. You can easily just sign up for that for a lot of your accounts or whatever. And I know I still get junk mail, but a while back, many years ago, I went to a website to get off the junk mail list. So I put a link in there. In case you need to do that or need to do it again, as may be the case for me, since I still get some. Um, what else? Shopping bags, of course. When you go to the store. I wash clothes less often. Okay, so just rewear your clothes if they don't stink or they're not dirty, obviously, right? Hey, I also and then of course when I do then hang dry, right? Weather permitting. Of course, today's probably not a great day. Yesterday was awesome, right? So yeah, I mean, and if you're washing clothes less often, you're obviously using less water, less energy, less detergent, which means less petrochemicals, right? So not only that, every time you wash your clothes, pieces of them come apart, right? So if you're wearing like or have like rayon or polyester or those synthetic fibers, they're basically derived from oil, right? They're from petrochemicals, and so kind of act like plastic. So they end up in the they're finding out actually ending up in the ocean, right? And so they're called what are they called? Microplastics. So so because we've all heard of plastic pollution in the ocean. Much of it's visible, but a lot of it's not visible. It's microscopic, and so it's just from the breakdown of the plastics, or in this case, of synthetic textiles. So. So there's just some examples. Let's see here. Not only that, of course, your clothes last longer, right? You don't have to replace or as often or buy them as often. Let's reuse or repurpose. Okay. Let's see here. Some more examples. Yeah, newspaper. If you get that, you can use it for many things after you're done reading the paper instead of just tossing in the trash, right? Of course, if you have a compost bin, you could put it in there. Um, so yeah, mulch, I use it for my dogs, so they can, do their business on gift wrapping, right? You don't have to go out and buy um, gift wrapping paper. You can use that. Um, speaking of my dog, back to my dogs, um, they have a bunch of pet beds, but I don't usually go out and buy a bunch of pet beds. I just, the pillows, because you're supposed to, they say after a couple of years, right, replace your pillow because it's got all these dust mites or whatever. So I just give them to my dogs to use as their little pet beds. So it's just a lot of this, or some of this might take like creative thinking, or just, before you toss something, maybe think about how you can reuse it or use it in some other way. Like plastic lids on containers. Um, this weekend I was repotting my house plants. I use some of those as saucers instead of going out and buying saucers, stuff like that. Or like jars, glass jars, you can reuse those, put leftovers in. So again, that means less stuff going to the landfills, and then you don't have to buy as much stuff, like I was saying, pet beds or containers or whatever. So saucers. Um, so let's see what else. Food, yeah. Brown paper bags. Yep, shredded to replace gift tissue. Yeah, I've done that. Put it through a little shredder. Okay. Grocery bags and trash bags. Y'all probably do that, right? Instead of buying trash bags. Okay. So you reuse it a couple times before eventually it does have to get landfilled or recycled. Okay. Yes, recycling. Okay. So basically, it's converting waste into reusable material, using it again. Of course, this helps because compared to making a product from scratch, right, it uses a lot less energy and resources. So there's a link to a local recycling. There's actually, yeah, a main recycling center in Killeen. And I found out they actually recycle quite a bit. Things you wouldn't think of, like cooking oil, pizza boxes, cell phones, batteries. So, or cell phone batteries, okay. And then they do have hazardous waste collection events posted on that website when they will be. So just kind of store that somewhere safe in your house. And then when the event happens, you take it there. Right? It's like household chemicals, oil, stuff like that. So, so yeah, those are I believe the 3 R's, the traditional R's of sustainability. But then I got some more. So, like we have here. Any questions so far?
Nope, not from them.
Okay,
I'll have some questions at the end.
that's fine if y'all want to save it for the end. Okay, or if you want to interrupt me or need clarification or have something to add to, because I just gave you some examples, but there's a whole bunch of other examples. There's probably some I didn't even think of, that I actually do. Just kind of don't even think about it. But all right, so yeah, redesign, refuse, repair, rot, recreate outdoors, redecorate, regift, rewrap, okay, and revegetate. Okay, so I kind of got carried away here. And then I think there's a few more that I couldn't find an R to begin with, so I just left them at the end. I'll discuss those briefly later on. So gonna go through these quickly. But redesign, okay, so so we're used to what's called a linear economy, where you begin with raw materials, and then once they're made and used, then usually the consumer, right, puts in a landfill. It becomes waste, and that's known as cradle to grave. Um, so the circular economy um, is more of the approach of cradle to cradle. So nothing. The goal is to really have not much waste or not much at all. Okay, so limit waste as much as possible. So recycling is a part of the circular economy, but a lot of it has to do with how you design the product to begin with, right? So this is just from the EPA, just kind of a quote from their website. So it's kind of definition of circular economy. Reduces material use, okay, so uses less resources to begin with. Redesigns the materials to be less resource intensive, including less energy intensive as well, using less energy. Recaptures waste. Okay, that could be through recycling, for example. So, yeah, so again, products and materials are designed from the outset to be reused, maybe more durable versus being disposable, or being able to be repaired, remanufactured somehow. So, because a lot of consequences of the design or decisions are made at the designing stage that have environmental impacts later on. So much as that is the initial designing phase. And then of course, you also need societies to have systems in place where we can make it easy for people to do this. For example, to recycle. So yeah, I was looking at the particular example of what's this here, clothing or textile waste. I didn't really know about this until recently, but see here, looking for my statistic. I think throw away an average of 65 to 80 pounds of clothes per year, which is roughly 8 trash bags. And about half of that is estimated to be still reusable. So some of that, so like you see here, yeah, can be reused. Like don't you donate it and then wash it and then someone else uses it, buys and use it. Okay, or it could also could be recycled, right? If it's just can't be reused or whatever, then it can. Or oftentimes in some places, clothing that's donated actually ends up getting recycled, turned into new clothing. So, so there's a lot of potential there. But you see, like now, how most of that, what did we say, up to 80 pounds of clothes each year per person. Yeah, most of it just goes right to the landfill. Some of it gets incinerated. Um, but anyway, they did a survey and they were like, well, why don't why did you go to the landfill? Why don't you just donate it? And a lot of people were like, they didn't want to drive more than 5 miles to drop it off at a donation facility. So it's just, I guess the main reason people landfill their clothes is because, or take it to the trash, I should say, which then goes to the landfill, as it's more convenient. So anyway, with a circular economy, it would make it easier, more convenient for people to do those things like recycle, okay, or donate in this case. Yeah, another statistic I came across: the average T-shirt uses 700 gallons of water to manufacture. I'm assuming that this T-shirt is made of cotton. Cotton's a very water-intensive crop. So, from planting the seed to harvest, right? There's a lot of water that's needed to grow that cotton. And then if you're looking at synthetic materials like polyester rayon, that's derived from petrochemicals, which is crude oil. So we talked about before, when you launder that, right, some of those little microfibers end up ultimately in the ocean, contributing to plastic pollution that we don't see. So, right. But yeah, it's kind of interesting. Anyway, you may have heard of the term fast fashion, but it's from like 2000 to 2015. The world population grew by 1/5, but the amount of clothing that was produced doubled. So again, that's cheap, low quality clothing, disposable clothing, I guess we can call it. Made to be tossed after a few wears versus being worn for many years. So it's much more contributing to that clothing waste like we see here. Refuse and repair. Okay, so let's see here. Refuse would be like not, I guess, buying stuff in the first place, or if you go like to a fast food restaurant, you get a drink, not maybe not using a straw, right? Or not getting too many napkins, things like that. So not being wasteful, I guess, right? Refusing, or don't only buying what you need, right? Don't buy new stuff. We're just talking about clothing. So you probably have a whole closet full of clothes you can wear, many of which you probably may never or hardly ever wear, right? So resist the urge to go out shopping for new clothes. That's again the fast fashion we just talked about. Or so that your clothing item has like a tear, or, or a stain, try to get that repaired or fixed, right? Sew it or take the stain out, right? So you could use it longer. So just try to, keep things in use as long as possible, make them last. And then um, this is another interesting trend that I guess has been going on for a while, and I'm expecting it's going to really pick up now because of inflation and all that's have becoming a bigger issue. Bartering and trading. So yeah, you could go. There's a website here. Many different websites you can go for all types of things that you might need. Even like neighborhood websites, I'll see where someone's looking for something. I think one person recently was looking for like a globe. Um, oh yeah, I have one. You don't have to go buy one, right? And it was collecting dust in their garage or something. But that's what that's about, So just so again, that stuff doesn't go to the landfill, or people don't have to go out and buy new stuff because someone's already has it that would be willing to give it to you or trade for something. So anyway, that's interesting website there, or with lots of links there to different things you might be interested in bartering or trading. Okay, rot, that's another R, which refers to composting. Okay, so I'm an avid composter. So they say that up to a third of our food goes to waste or rots. And I guess most times it ends up in the landfill. Okay, and it doesn't have to, of course. It can end up in your compost pile, right? So it's especially the case for produce past its prime, right? We never get around to eating. Okay, so you, instead of throwing in the kitchen trash, you throw it in your compost bin, or other things too, like when you're preparing food. There's the banana peels or things like that. Things that you cut apart, tea bags, coffee grounds. There's a whole, yeah, if you go, I think, to this link, you should probably see a whole list. Eggshells, nutshells, cardboard, shredded newspaper. We talked about newspaper before, grass clippings. What else do they have on there? Hair, fur, fireplace ashes, cotton, old cotton t-shirts, sawdust, leaves. Some people blow leaves or whatever, and you can just actually collect them, put them in your compost bin, right? So anyway, yeah, and of course, there's kind of a science to it. You want to keep a couple things in mind, right? Like it says here, proper ratio of browns to greens, and then of course, water it ever so often. Because what's in there is organisms that are breaking down this organic matter. Some that you can see, like bugs, and others, of course, that you can't see, like bacteria and fungi. But of course, you end up with what looks like soil, nice, dark, fluffy material that you can add to your soil, especially if you're a gardener. It's a good amendment. I don't really have a garden. I have like house plants, and so every time I repot them, I add some of that compost to them. So, but it's good way to get rid of much of that food waste and other waste too. So, all right, what else? Another R. I have revegetate. So, how we landscape, right? Kind of rethink that. Or it's kind of gained popularity recently, but maybe using more natives or maybe plants that are don't require much water, fertilizers, right? Of course, natives are um, good to use for that. They're adapted to our climate, our conditions, right? Here in Central Texas, the heat, the drought, that. So there's a link here where it's got I think it's a searchable guide, and there's also like a pamphlet um, of like specific types of plants, right? Um, perennials and trees and shrubs and grasses and so on that you can landscape with for natives. So yeah, they of course the natives, they use less resources, right? Water, they just rely on rainfall, whatever they get. Usually, I guess in cases years that we have bad droughts, you probably want to give them some water, right? So they don't die. Pesticides, they don't, really need much. Pesticides or fertilizers, they don't have to be babied, right? Like the non-natives. So, what else? Skip leaf blowing. So, or whatever people do when they, are blowing around grass clippings or whatever, I guess to make the area clean and tidy. That's really unnecessary. If you just let the stuff there on the lawn, it'll eventually decompose and then return those nutrients back to your soil. Just have to wait a while, right? So, but eventually that does happen. Of course, when you're using a leaf blower, that's creating a lot of pollution. You don't want to breathe that in, all that dust, and of course the exhaust from the machine, and then the noise, and it's just, I never think it's a good idea. But of course, you're using energy too, so sometimes it's what do they say? It's sometimes it's better to do, or you can do more by doing less, I think is the quote. So that would be case of, yard work. That's a good idea. Here's another R, recreate outdoors. Okay. And you don't have to go too far. Like you see here, there's the city, a little green space out there. Actually, here on CTC, we've got the Eagle Trail. Some of you may be familiar with it. It's actually pretty nice. So you could just, get out and wander in the woods, right? Connect with nature. Um, or you could go further away, right? Plan a camping trip out in some forest. But it doesn't matter. The point is just to spend some time out in nature. You could just chill out. You could walk. You could bird watch. I mean, there's all kinds of things you could do, right? Hunting, even fishing. Whatever you're into. But this is researchers are finding out actually important to our overall health, mental health, well-being. It lowers our stress, reduces blood pressure, heart rate, reduces anxiety, um, helps our mood. And not only that, it helps to foster more positive attitude about the environment and caring for the environment. So, yep. And for kids, if you have kids, it's really important too to get them outdoors. They're in the first place naturally, want to be outdoors, but it's important for their proper development as well. There was this book written, Richard Louv, I guess is how you pronounce his name. He wrote The Last Child in the Woods. Anyway, he had a term called nature deficit disorder, which is a growing problem now because of technology, how we're always connected online or whatever with electronic devices. And this is especially detrimental to kids. And so it come up with a nature deficit disorder term. It's basically in nature is important for our health. So yeah, for your health and the planet's then. I guess you could take it a step further, right? If you do recreate outdoors, well, some people can take ecotourism, kind of a definition here. Usually towards exotic, usually threatened natural environments, intended to support conservation efforts and observe wildlife. So usually what comes to mind is like a safari, like you see here. And it can get pretty expensive, but there's other forms of ecotourism. If you ever taken like a whale watching tour, bird watching tour, anything like that, um, going to, I don't know, Costa Rica doing zip lining, just basically recreating outdoors and spending money, helping that local economy. That's you're contributing to ecotourism. Of course, that's grown a lot over recent years, become more popular. So, can y'all still hear me? It says something about
Yes.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
All right. I don't know if it's just a default pop-up that comes up or what. All right. What do we have here? Redecorate. Okay. So maybe looking at how decorating in your home, how you decorate it, maybe bring more natural elements indoors. House plants have become real popular since I guess COVID, right? Um, you know, um, and I've got a ton of house plants myself, but other ways too, like you see here. Actually, this picture is from Amazon, so they were selling these. I forget how much, but you can actually just go outside and collect some of this stuff, right? Right now, especially, I got some in my backyard, some dead uh, little blue stem grass. They're probably like 3 feet tall. And I just put them in a little vase, and there they are. Like I don't have to water them. I don't have to baby them. I could just toss them out next year, get me some other ones later. So um, very low maintenance, and it looks nice, natural, and everything. And if you're a crafty person, right, you could make useful things, right, for your home as well out of things you find outside. So lots of ideas there again if you're more of the creative type. Regift and rewrap. Okay. Oh yes, and as far as, well, regifting. Okay, so we've probably all done it and maybe have felt guilty about it, but probably shouldn't feel guilty about it, right? Because otherwise it probably would have ended up in the trash in the landfill. So, right. um, and there's actually, I found out, let's see, in the U.S. anyway, National Regifting Day is December 18th. So, um, yeah. And there's many office holiday parties, and you exchange gifts, and you get something alike. Well, I know I've been regifted things by other people, and then I've done the same. So it's, like I said, it's very common. So yeah, it says that research shows 40% of office party gifts are actually regifted without use. So there's certain things to consider, of course, when you're regifting, right? You want to it still be nice, usable condition, and all of that. Um, and then maybe about if you do get a gift, usually like flowers, for Valentine's or Mother's Day's coming up, right? Very expensive, and then they only last a few days, and then they're very resource intensive to produce and then distribute, ship, whatever, and then they come in all this plastic packaging and everything. So it would be much more sustainable just to get like a house plant, a little house plant, right? That will last much longer, provide benefits like we were talking about before, bringing natural elements indoors, and help provide oxygen and things like that. Nice environment to your home. Increases the humidity as well. You're one of those people that buys a humidifier, you can actually get a bunch of house plants and water them, and that'll increase the humidity in your house. So, so just kind of rethink gifting, I guess, and then regifting, and then of course, I think we talked about this before, like wrapping. So you get these little gift bags. I always reuse mine, right? Save them and then reuse them for whenever I have to give a gift the next occasion. So reuse as often as possible. So like I said, lots of ideas here. Mindful eating. See, so um, few options here. You can grow your own food. I don't grow much of my own food. I grow sprouts, and that's about it. And I have a few herbs, but yeah, my soil's pretty bad. It require a lot of work. I do, like I said, have a small compost pile that I tend to. But yeah, some people are really into, growing their own vegetables and fruits and all of that. Um, and if not, you can always buy local, right? That the farmers markets. And then also buy organic, right? If you're at the grocery store, we've got many organic options. Usually they're more expensive, but some not so much as others. It kind of just depends. And then yeah, eat less meat or animal products because these livestock animals, of course, require a lot of resources basically to grow, right? Mainly in the feed. So yeah, a lot of water, fertilizers, right? Pesticides that goes into producing the grain that we then feed these animals that we then eat or eat whatever they make, right? Cheese or milk or whatever. So even if you don't want to go completely, what is it, vegan or vegetarian, it would help to just eat less meat, and of course probably helps your overall health as well, right? So, or more healthy, right? To mean a more plant-based diet. Looks like here 40% of Americans are shifting towards eating more plant-based foods. Okay. Yep. So making more of an effort to do that for different reasons, health concerns, ethics, sustainability, like we're talking about. Okay. What else? Citizen. Okay, so I think we are done with the R's. Okay, we had the mind. Okay, that was the last one. Mindful eating. Okay, that's not an R. And then here's another one that's not an R. Citizen science. Okay. So just got kind of a definition. What is that? Public participation and collaboration in scientific research to increase scientific knowledge. So that's people basically helping scientists do their work, right? Usually online in some database, right? Collecting data, taking pictures, things like that. So Lots of examples there. Let's see. Oh, that one, there was an article written about this in my co-op magazine, Nerdle Patrol. Okay. So, your typical beach cleanups where they pick up trash and litter on the beach. Now they have these nerdle patrols. And so there's like more than 2,000 volunteers now. And removed more than 1.5 million nurdles from beaches. Nurdles are just tiny little pellets of plastics that are produced by industry, which is the waste that yeah, ends up around the coast. And so, of course, it would be hard for individual scientists to go out there and get this data, collect these nurdles. So you have all these people helping, right? And then sharing that information with scientists. But yeah, so it's also citizen science, community science, crowd science, civic science, volunteer monitoring. So it comes in many different forms. Let's see, I think this one. Trying to look for it here. Oh, this one. This is the one that I have an account with or a login. So that's pretty cool. iNaturalist, you just got to share your what you found, your species that you found locally, right, with others in the area. So like biomonitoring kind of. So anyway, there's those are all links there if you're interested in any of those. And then finally, I think this is the last one, natural or green burial, which I also found out recently about. So instead of putting embalming of the body, the dead body, and then putting it in a coffin, and then it goes, around in a cemetery, whatever. This is a little different, where it's more green, right? More sustainable, using less resources, right? And kind of going back to like instead of having waste, you end up with kind of recycling of nutrients, right? So your body back to the earth. So let's see here. Website here says American funerals are responsible each year for the felling of 30 million board feet of casket wood, some of which comes from tropical hardwoods, 90,000 tons of steel, 1.6 million tons of concrete for burial vaults, and 800,000 gallons of embalming fluid. So this would natural green burials, if they would become more common, or as they become more common, right, would help reduce much of that. And there's actually locations where you can have a green or natural burial. So I just took a little screenshot of that. And kind of another interesting look too at end of life. You go to a cemetery, and oftentimes they're very well kept. The landscaping, right? There's a lot of mowing and watering and whatever that's done. There's more of a trend now to have it more be like wild with native plants, and then having instead of having the cemetery, I guess, more open to the public for recreation, walking, bird watching, things like that. So there's this project in Austin for Austin Memorial Park. It's called the Prairie Project. So they're looking at converting that cemetery into more of one of these community natural areas where people can go and, like we said, recreate outdoors. And of course, they'd use native plants and all of that. So anyway, there's a lot that individuals can do, and then there's a lot that communities are doing, businesses as well. So it's there's a lot of ways to think to solve environmental problems. So oftentimes we kind of get a little maybe depressed, but there's hope. And of course, if we do some of these things or a lot of these things, it makes a difference. I think that was it. Yeah, these are just links. I think some of these we saw in the individual slides, but I kind of put them there on one slide there again. So yeah, that's it for the presentation. And just let me know if you have any questions.
Alyssa, are there any questions? No questions at the time. I do have some questions.
Okay.
I'm really, really, really happy. If you want to unshare, I'm really happy to hear all the different ideas that you had for what we can do individually, because those of us who have the title eccentric now can say we're environmentalists because I literally have like I found you know those plastic drawers, turned them upside down, put mud in the top popped holes, and I have a vegetable garden growing in my house. You know, or like I'm the
There you go.
notorious Christmas wrapper, but I turn it
Right.
upside inside out and just draw a happy birthday and whatever on the backside of
Yeah.
everything,
Yeah.
you know? So, and right now I have vegetables hanging in milk cartons
Mhm.
that I'm growing, you know, and
Right.
so it every little bit helps, but people look at you like, what are you doing? Why are you keeping this jar? It's a
Right.
great jar for something. Yeah.
Yep. Reuse. Yeah. A lot of it, yeah, it's amazing and it's kind of you get almost in awe of your own creativity, right? Like, oh, I never thought about that. And then it's like that's a good idea, right? So
Hmm.
yeah, I know what
Yeah.
you mean.
Yeah, well, and I did have also a question. Well, two questions. One, you talked about solar panels, and
Mhm.
the guys who knock on my door all the time are always saying, "But they're free. The government pays for it." Is that truly?
They'll help you pay for part of it, but no, not all of it.
Oh,
No, people
okay.
people get them, and then there's um you will end up getting they end up paying for themselves at some point, usually many years down the road, right? Because you're saving in electricity or having a
Right,
maybe a I don't know about a zero electric bill, but much reduced electric bill. So especially if electric rates go up, you kind of have to do the math, right, to see how long it'll take for you to for those to get your
yeah.
payback time, right? So
Well, and
but yeah, the I think there's still I forget how much it is. It's a few $1,000s that the government will give you a tax credit for. So
that's
that's
good.
still in place. Yep. Mhm.
Well, in the very beginning, you talked about how we're overstepping, and we're already now overstepping. I mean, have we doomed ourselves, or can we reverse this at any point?
It gets a harder, I guess. Yeah. But like I said, it just gets harder. But there's things that we can do. I was talking about the circular economy. That's not really mainstream now. We've had for a long time the linear economy, but I think things are shifting now. Of
Mhm.
course, I didn't even talk about climate change, but that's a global environmental problem, which they
Right,
global problems tend to be harder to solve because you got to get everybody on the same page, cooperating and doing, working together. So
right.
it can seem a little daunting at times for some of these environmental problems. But again, there's a lot that individuals can do.
Mhm.
Um, I didn't even talk about, ways to reduce, or I didn't take too much here about ways specifically to reduce carbon emissions, but there's things we can do
Right.
there too. So
Well, and I've read an article about, and I don't know if it was the right article. I didn't do a lot of research on it, but they were saying things like the non-stick pans, or they do stuff to the environment. So, there's a lot of hidden things
yeah,
that we don't even know that
right,
we use every day that are damaging, like the ozone and,
right.
hairspray.
Yeah, all the chemicals, right. Yeah, and
Yeah.
like, we didn't really realize it until, like I was saying, Rachel Carson came out with her book about the dangers of specifically DDT, which was,
Mhm.
in widespread use back then. And we didn't, kind of found out the consequences until, later. And it was almost too late, but, we're able
Right.
to, yeah.
Well, and there are some, I mean, we can learn a lot from, cultures that have been using natural stuff. Like, I'm from Louisiana, and we got rid of all of our garden slugs by putting out bowls of beer. And literally it worked. The slugs crawled into the beer, drank the beer, got drunk, and
Oh,
drowned.
yeah.
And so there
There you
are a
go.
lot of natural things if
Right,
people would just kind of look for them, rather
right.
than grab that pesticide
Chemical,
immediately.
exactly, right. Yeah, it's always, yeah, best to do something or use something like non-toxic, non-chemical, as some alternative. Yep.
And I just have one other question. Do you get ants in your compost?
Um,
Seems like that'd be a problem.
you mean like fire ants?
Hmm.
Well, usually, yeah, we have a lot of fire ants around here. Sometimes I do. Like I was dealing with compost this spring break and I didn't have any issues with ants at all. But again, I think it's usually it might be a problem when it's dry and they're seeking moisture because your compost pile is pretty moist. But there's
Yeah,
other areas in your lawn that might be moist too. They may
yeah,
gravitate towards, but I don't think another thing too, fire ants, they tend to be carnivorous, so they might be looking for bugs in your compost. So,
yeah.
but it for me, it hasn't been big issue. So in that case, I do remember it being an issue occasionally, but it's of course I get you know deal with the fire ants in that case, like I do with my lawn, just in general. So
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I was just wondering if you had a save the planet idea for ants
Hmm.
as I'm,
Well,
scratching
they say, yeah,
ants from the
boiling
weekend.
water, boiling water, I've heard things like that, but that's what's great about, going online. You can find out all these alternative,
Yeah.
non-chemical ways.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think one of those websites, let me see here, you might be interested in actually, I should just pointed it out. Oh, I'm not sharing it anymore. It's the ewg.org. There's
Mhm.
consumer guides to like food. It's got like the Dirty Dozen. So you know how organic produce can be expensive. So if you're in a
Mhm.
budget, maybe just buy those produce items that are organic. The Dirty
Mhm.
Dozen ones because they have the most pesticide residues.
Yeah.
And then there's others like about household cleaners, the rating the toxicity levels and
Mhm.
so yeah, you might be interested actually in that one. Anyway, it's on that last slide. It's the ewg.org. Got a lot of
Okay.
consumer guides for different products, household products and food
Okay.
and so on. Mhm.
Yeah, so do you think that if the planet as a whole, and that is a lot to ask, started just trying to do some natural stuff,
Mhm.
we have a chance?
Um, yeah, I think it definitely helps.
That
Every little
wasn't
bit
that
helps because
wasn't
there's so many of
convincing.
us, right? But yeah,
So,
so all of us
we're
doing
hopeful.
something. And like I said, there's actually a lot you can do. So, I mean, I ask my students, are y'all environmentalists? What do you think? Why do you say you're environmentalists? And most students are like, no, well, not really, because they think you have to be like um, way out there, and protesting and, being very
Saving the
political
whales.
and then doing all these things, composting and recycling and doing all like everything you could possibly do. But even if you just do a little bit, right? Um, or do what you're comfortable with, or what's you know just kind of explore and try different
Yeah.
things. Yeah. And then also, like you were saying, just be creative, you know,
Mhm.
looking for uses
Yeah.
for items that you can reuse instead of tossing. I do that all the time. So you'd be
Yeah.
surprised. I found out recently of course, I compost my tea bags, right? But before I put them in the compost, I was like, well, let me clean my little mushrooms with them. The mushrooms have
Mhm.
that dirt, and it actually works
Mhm.
pretty good. Instead of turning on the water faucet and brushing it, which was a real pain, I would just get my little tea bags that are still wet, right? And then, so
That
um,
and I'm a firm believer that you cannot have too many pieces of painted wood all over your walls and yard.
painted wood.
Paint everything.
Oh,
So
I see. Okay.
so
Yeah.
well, we're gonna wrap up, but listen,
All right.
thank you so much for you've given us so much information. You pretty much were the overview of everything we're doing this year. And because we'll have like one composting event and one 3Rs event, one
Great.
why we do the burns and all this other stuff. And so you were the culmination of
Yeah.
everything that we're going to be dealing with this
Good.
year.
Like
So
kind of
we
like a preview, right? Kind of like
yes,
a
yeah. Well, and then we're doing like
A
land,
teaser.
animal, and bird conservation. So
Okay.
we're doing a little bit of everything, you
Yeah,
know.
the native landscaping really helps with that because
Yeah.
you'll attract more butterflies, pollinators,
Hmm.
birds. I didn't even talk about bird feeding, but you can get into that. A lot of people are into that. So
Yeah, as I can attest to, every bird and clean comes to my
yeah,
house.
yeah, yeah,
So
yeah. I just put out my hummingbird feeder yesterday, so be expecting them any day now.
yeah. And if
Yeah,
anybody wants monarchs or any kind of thing, put out butterfly bushes. They
mhm,
love it. They
yeah.
love it.
Or
So
milkweed, a lot of your milkweed
yes,
plants. Yeah.
yes.
So,
So,
all
well,
right.
thank you so, so much for
All
joining
right.
us today and giving us all this background information. This is amazing. You guys, take one of her classes. I wanted to take one of your classes, but the timing is not bad. It doesn't work for me. It's like,
It's
oh,
offered online too.
oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So,
Well, see, guys, y'all think about this. There would be a ton of information. And so thank you. And before we go, I just want to remind everyone that there's also an aspect, a political aspect of the environment, and that is getting in touch with legislatures. We're going to have Dr. Leanne Temple of Fort Hood that's going to be talking next Monday on how to contact your legislation in order to make some changes for, government and climate and all of that. So we will have that. And then next Wednesday, we have our CTC astronomer Warren Hart, who's doing another night sky tour. We do these monthly, and he tells you what to constellations to see when you look up in the sky every night. So make sure that you join us next week for that. We have Writers Guild this Wednesday. Make sure you, if you don't know what that is, call the library and we'll tell you all about the Writers Guild. All righty. Well, thank you again. And you guys, y'all have an awesome, awesome week. And everybody get back to work. Spring break is over.
all right. Well,
All
have a nice
righty.
spring, everyone.
Yes. Bye. Thank
Bye.